Hey everyone, this is a video on how to make your Yuxin Red 6x6 just as good as mine, which is the current world record cube. First of all, I wanted to mention that people have been giving me some negative response following my most recent video, which 6x6 I think is actually the best. People seem to think that I've become a sellout. I only recommend the Yuxin Red because I'm sponsored by them, and that I actually think one of the other cubes are better, and I'm just blatantly lying to you. This is completely not true. I've always brought my honest opinion to my channel over the years, and I will be continuing to do that for as long as I make videos. This will not be affected by who I'm sponsored by or any of my other cubing situations. The biggest thing that kind of threw me off was that people thought I was using Yuxin cubes because I was partnered with Yuxin, and this is the complete opposite of what actually happened. I use Yuxin cubes, or I am partnered with Yuxin because I use their cubes. I like their cubes. I trust them to make cubes that are going to work for me in the future. Before I signed with Yuxin, I was in serious talks with all three of the major big cube manufacturers, and really what came down to my final decision was that I thought Yuxin had the best quality products. I had all the new releases, the Yuxin 7, all the 6x6s, all the 5x5s that had just come out, and really I knew that the Yuxin cubes were the ones that I was going to be using over the next few months and hopefully the next few years, and that is why I signed with Yuxin. Honestly, if I wanted to have just gone for the most money possible, I would have made a different decision. Additionally, another thing to remember when watching any cubing video by any cuber is that obviously it's that cuber's opinion on any piece of hardware. My official recommendation is going to be the cube that fits me the best, the one that I get the best results on, the one that I think is the best to use in competitions. This may vary from cuber to cuber, especially me with I have a pretty unique turning style in the fact that I want the maximum speed, and my accurate turning usually doesn't rely on corner cutting in hardware as much as some others. So that's why cubers sometimes prefer different hardware, especially when hardware quality gets to be pretty similar. So just always keep that in mind. And now for the meat of the video, how to make your Yuxin Red 6x6 just as good as mine. The Yuxin Red 6x6 is actually incredibly difficult to set up, which is why I think a lot of people underrate this cube heavily, and which is why I think a lot of people thought that I'd be ridiculous to recommend this cube because the Yuxin Red 6x6s that they've tried, yes, probably are worse than the Moyu and the Chi cubes, but I guarantee you my Yuxin Red 6x6 is the best one in the world, and I will try and help you make your cube to be just as good as the one I'm holding right now. So, first step in the Yuxin Red 6x6 is obviously you have to get the Yuxin Red 5x5 springs. These are available on thecubicle.us for $1. I'll link them in the description, and honestly, if you don't have these springs, there's really no point in having this cube. You need the springs, so just go get the springs. So, you're going to have to go get the springs and then do the spring swap. So, in order to do the spring swap, I'll show you guys the easiest way to do it. You can also do it without actually taking out any pieces on some cubes, but it's a little tricky, and this method is incredibly reliable and pretty simple. So what you want to do is you take out these 8 pieces here, the 4 edges on each side. Then you just separate the middles out, and you're going to unscrew the screw, swap the spring, and screw it back in. Make sure you don't accidentally lift the center piece up and rotate it around, as this little bump here makes sure the misalignments don't happen. It's pretty simple to do. Just make sure, if you're worried about it, just press down here and unscrew and then swap the spring. So yeah, pretty big. Alright, after you've done the spring swap on this cube, next comes the most important part, tensioning the cube. So tensions on this cube need to be incredibly precise to get the proper results, which may be very daunting to the newer cuber, but I promise it's not actually that difficult. It will just take some time. So now that you have your cube with the spring swapped, the cube is probably all sorts of messed up in terms of tension. So what you should do is you should tighten each side way too tight. Just tighten the whole cube. It should be very tough to turn, very stiff. And then what you should do is you should loosen it a little bit so where it's still pretty stiff, but you can tell the relative tensions on each side and try and get the tensions to all match up. These don't have to be exact, but you want the cube to be sort of in the similar tensioning spot on each side, but definitely still too tight. So at this point, you should hopefully have a too tight cube, but is evenly tensioned on all 6 sides. At this point, you want to, on each side, loosen each side by about 1/8 or 1/4 turn, depending on how tight your cube is, until the cube is you can just barely tell that the cube is no longer too tight. If you tighten the cube anymore, it should instantly like kind of freeze up and take a lot of effort to turn. And just before you get to this point is exactly where you want the cube to be. The cube should be able to turn fairly very smoothly, and you should be able to get yeah, your turning should be able to be just as smooth as this, ideally, if you have similar finger tricks. The key here is that it needs to be just before it's too tight is the magic spot. Obviously, it's still not going to be perfect tension, as you kind of guessed on the tight tensions beforehand. So what you want to do is you want to do about an hour of solving. Yes, a whole hour. It's going to take a little bit of time. And for the first few solves, stop after a couple centers, try and tell which side is too loose, too tight, make micro adjustments, stop after edges, do the same thing, after 3x3 do the same thing. Do this for a few solves, and then, I don't know, after about 20 minutes of this, just after a whole solve, it should feel pretty good at this point. Have to do a whole solve and then tell where its side needs to be tightened or loosened, and then do this for at least 12 or 15 solves. At this point, your cube should probably be perfect if you've been doing this for about an hour, and hopefully you've achieved the perfect tensioning. So I'll go ahead and show you the tensions real quick. It's kind of tough to tell, but I'm pulling them as far apart as they'll go, so that's kind of the gap you want on all your pieces. The sides should all be the same, obviously, so yep. For lubing, you're going to want to use some Maru and Z Lube. I actually don't know, I don't think I've put anything else in this cube, so I haven't really tried it out. But what I've used specifically is I use Z Lube once every, I don't know, month or two or something. I use Z Lube to lube this cube. It keeps it nice and loose, and Z Lube doesn't wear out too quickly. Maru obviously wears out quickly, and actually Maru will make your cube a little too fast immediately when you put it in. So put Maru in, do a couple solves, and then it should be pretty ideal for about 10 to 15 solves or so. If you know anything about Maru Lube, it wears out incredibly quickly, so that's kind of to be expected. If you're competing in a competition with this cube, definitely lube it with Maru. Do probably 5 or 6 solves, just so you know it's not going to be too fast, and then bring your cube up and go compete. Other than that, it will definitely help to break this cube in. Just as a note, when I did this initially and tensioned it and put the lube in, it felt pretty amazing right when I did that. So if you tensioned it and you have a new cube and you've done everything I said and it doesn't feel great, you should probably try and do the tensions again. But if it feels like really solid but maybe not quite as perfect as I've been saying, the fix here is very simple. Just do about 2,000 solves, and then it'll be perfect. So there you go.